Ngayon na ang panahon upang bumangon tayo muli. Tayo na tayo, Pilipinas. At sa pagtayo ng mas matatag at mas matibay na hinaharap, kasama nyo ang Holcim. Tayo na tayo, Pilipinas.
Nagsimula sa isang pangarap.
Ako na po, ma'am.
Ika'y tutulungang ibahin ang buhay na nakasanayan.
Naka 24 months ka na sa pag-ibig.
May panghulog na ako sa motor.
Bagong motor.
Gagawa ng hakbang para mapaghandaan ng forever.
Ingat ka ha.
At harapin ang bukas ng may maaasahan. Simulan mo na ang forever mo ngayon. Fund your forever with Pag-IBIG Fund.
We are here to build 10,000 houses
in Negros Occidental.
by 2024.
We are here
to build homes
for families,
to build communities,
to build hope,
and ultimately
To build lives.
That's why we're here.
To build. We're here to build.
a sense of accomplishment.
by giving people access to resources that will help them.
Realize their dream of a home to call their own.
we're here to build.
A sense of security.
by helping make sure that every house built
is safe, sturdy, and secures families.
for generations to come.
We're here to build.
A sense of growth.
by helping equip people with skills, knowledge, and opportunities towards a brighter future.
We are here to build a sense of hope.
By helping people come together.
As a community that is progressive, responsive, compassionate, and stands united, come what may.
But I certainly hope that in the next generation and many, many generations after that, that this value continues and that there's always a culture of helping, not just being responsible for your stakeholders, but really being responsible for society as a whole.
We are here
To impact society.
Impact society.
Impact society.
Impact society.
Impact society.
As a whole.
As a whole.
As a whole, as a whole.
Impact society as a whole.
We are here to impact society as a whole.
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 Amo ini ang Negros Occidental Impact Coalition.
For us housing officials, as part of our guiding principle, we consider shelter as a right of every Filipino family. Maraming salamat at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Presenting the Organization of Socialized and Economic Housing Developers of the Philippines' Shelter Agenda for a New Decade. The Philippine Private Sector Initiative, a new human settlements and urban development agenda. Institutionalize private sector participation in policymaking under the new Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. Improving ease of doing business. Expanding housing finance and sustainable incentives programs for homebuyers. Upholding fair access to land through a genuine national land use policy. Redefining affordable housing. Promoting green building, resilient settlements, and post-pandemic approach in designing spaces. To to learn more about the Organization of Socialized and Economic Housing Developers of the Philippines, please visit us at www.oshdp.com or email us at secretariat@oshdp.com.
The Department of Community and Environmental Resource Planning, also known as DSERP, is one of the academic units of the College of Human Ecology in UP Los Baños, founded in 1983. It is among the first that offered an undergraduate human settlements planning program in the Philippines. It functions within the harmonizing framework of humans in relation to their environment to contribute towards the national goal of improving the quality of life of the Filipino people. It is DSERP's vision to be a leading institution providing high-quality education, research, and public service in human settlements planning towards sustainable development. Our mission is anchored in the development and promotion of sustainable and resilient human settlements through education of environmental planning professionals with holistic and interdisciplinary perspective, knowledge generation in situational analysis, planning, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation of development interventions, and provision of technical assistance to various institutions. Our initiatives are focused on achieving Sustainable Development Goal 11, to make cities and communities safe, resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. The Technical Assistance Program in Human Settlements Planning, also known as TAP-HSP, is the banner public service arm of the department providing technical assistance to local government units in crafting their risk-sensitive development plans. The goal of TAP-HSP is to provide public service by creating institutional linkages with key stakeholders such as the local government units, national government agencies, and non-government organizations, tapping the vast resource of the department in the form of its faculty, students, and alumni, thereby increasing capability through training and continuing education. The components of TAP-HSP are capacity development for planners, Young Professionals Mentoring Program, Model Community or City for Sustainability and Resilience, and Praxis or the Practice of Profession. Over the last 5 years, TAP-HSP has assisted in plan preparation for more than 30 local government units in the country. Majority of these are located in Calabarzon, Mimaropa, and Bicol regions in the island of Luzon. TAP-HSP also provides capacitation and training through the conduct of short courses on environmental planning, planning tools and techniques such as climate and disaster risk assessments, participatory and GIS-based mapping, and nature-based solutions. Through TAP-HSP, students gain actual planning experiences, allowing graduates of BS Human Ecology major in Human Settlements Planning to be qualified to take the licensure exam for environmental planners. At the same time, partners are capacitated to conduct participatory planning approaches, keeping intact the principles of safety, sustainability, resiliency, and inclusivity. In the spirit of public service, DSERP will continue to expand its networks to serve more cities and communities. The Department of Community and Environmental Resource Planning. The Department of Community and Environmental Resource Planning founded in 1983, is one of the 4 academic units of the College of Human Ecology in UP Las Baños. It is among the first that offered an undergraduate human settlements planning program in the Philippines. It functions within the harmonizing framework of humans in relation to their environment to contribute towards the national goal of improving the quality of life of the Filipino people. DSERP envisions itself as a leading institution, providing high-quality education, research, and public service in human settlements planning towards sustainable development. Its mission is anchored in the development and promotion of sustainable and resilient human settlements through education of environmental planning professionals with holistic and interdisciplinary perspective. Its research initiatives are focused on achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 11 to make cities and communities safe, resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. The TAP-HSP, or the Technical Assistance Program in Human Settlements Planning, is the banner public service arm of the department, providing technical assistance to local government units in crafting their risk-sensitive development plans. Through the TAP-HSP, students gain real-world planning experiences. Graduates of BSHE HSP are qualified to take the licensure exam for environmental planners. For the past years,
Hello, good afternoon. I just want to give everyone a shout out and just to introduce myself. My name is David Ingles. I am one of the hosts and anchors at Bloomberg TV, based out of Hong Kong. You probably notice the background right behind me. I'm actually in Hong Kong right now. I'm also from the Philippines, just in case Filipino didn't both. And so here we are, and it's been hopefully a informative 2 days. I've heard it's nearly 50 sessions across 50 presentations rather across 16 sessions. I'm sure you've learned a lot, and there might be a chance that we inundated you with too much information. Just in case you're joining us right now, by the way, because I'm seeing the participant count move up. My name is David Ingles. I'll be your host for this next 60 minutes or so. I'm with Bloomberg TV. I'm based out of Hong Kong. So I guess the next 60 minutes, we're going to try to put everything together. I mean, certainly this 2-day forum is not simply about just dumping information on all of you. The point really at the end of all of this is we know what the problem is, and we're here to find solutions. So let me just tell you what's coming up in the next 60 minutes or so, this closing plenary, if you will. So we're going to hear commitments really from major stakeholders on really how we take this issue forward and how we bridge all of these gaps. Let me just get a little bit more specific here. Commitments from on housing finance, construction and housing industry, NGOs. We're also going to hear from the youth sector and what their commitments are. And obviously, arguably central to all of this is really what the government does, particularly as we move into the elections next year, because this is certainly a problem that's not going to go away for the next couple of months or so, which I think we'll talk a little bit more about later on. Now, at this point in time, I want to start off by simply introducing our next round of speakers. We'll begin one by one, and in terms of their commitment. So let me bring in the Chief Executive Officer of the Home Development Mutual Fund, Ahmad Rizaldi Moti, or otherwise known, by the way, as Pag-IBIG. It's the largest source of home financing in the Philippines, mandated, of course, to provide affordable financing for many Filipinos. Let's hear what their commitments are.
I-update ko nga i-update ko nga nung dating CV na ato.
To our stakeholders, subject matter experts, industry professionals, thought leaders, and all the participants of this Philippine Housing Forum, good afternoon. It's my pleasure and honor to be invited to this forum and join like-minded institutions and individuals who share our goal of promoting affordable and decent housing to uplift the lives of Filipinos and drive economic growth. Your theme this year, Building Forward Better for Inclusive Housing, speaks of our common pursuit of building sustainable and suitable shelter toward creating inclusive communities. For more than 4 decades, we at Pag-IBIG Fund have remained committed to the fulfillment of our mandate in providing affordable home financing for Filipino workers. Truly, the importance of having a home has become even more pronounced amid the global pandemic. As the largest source of home financing in the Philippines, we at Pag-IBIG Fund recognize our role in the housing industry and our country's economy. This role has become more significant over the past 2 years as we continue to cope and recover from the effects of the global pandemic. In 2020, we provided our members loan payment reprieves with grace periods in accordance with our country's Bayanihan 1 and 2 Acts, a 3-month moratorium offer, and a special housing loan restructuring program. We also made available a 10 billion peso home construction financing line to our partner developers to help them sustain their operations and pump prime the housing industry, complemented by special promo rates on our home loans to aid our members and boost housing demand. The momentum built by these interventions allowed us to reach new milestones in 2021, even amid the pandemic. As of September this year, we have released 65.48 billion pesos in home loans, the highest amount of home loans we have released for any January to September period in our history, and, more importantly, translates to 63,765 Filipino families having new homes of their own. And as we sustain our collective recovery from the effects of the pandemic, we shall continue to implement programs to ensure that home financing in our country remains accessible and responsive. Aside from our regular housing loan program, we have our affordable housing program for minimum wage and low income members, which provides them access to home loans that has a special subsidized interest rate of only 3% per annum, the lowest in the market. Recently, we also introduced our Home Equity Appreciation Loan or HEAL program, a program that will allow our existing home loan borrowers whose accounts are updated and are at least 5 years old to secure an additional loan based on the net value of their mortgage property with us. By doing so, we shall provide more borrowers with added liquidity to further improve their homes or to address their financial needs. Our Countryside Housing Initiative or CHI program also remains available for organizations from both the private and government sectors for them to build quality and affordable housing projects for their employees, constituents, and other beneficiaries. A prime example of this initiative is our partnership with Habitat for Humanity Philippines in 2018 to help the Children's Shelter of Cebu provide a housing program for their employees. Again, we'd like to thank Habitat for Humanity Philippines for including us in this forum. You, along with our members and stakeholders, may rest assured that Pag-IBIG Fund shall remain a strong and reliable partner in our shared goal of building forward better for inclusive housing. Thank you and good afternoon.
Just a little nugget of information. So, to those of you who didn't hear, I'm based in Hong Kong. About 10 minutes from where I am right now, I'm at the Bloomberg studios, is the Philippine consulate. And we have hundreds of thousands, of course, of our kababayans here. And one of the busiest counters, actually, at the Philippine consulate does belong to Pag-IBIG. So there is really a need there. And there is really, of course, that assistance really being extended to all our kababayans. Now, at this point in time, I want to bring in the subdivision of and housing Developers Association. That's SHDA. It's essentially a group of subdivision owners and developers that support housing for the homeless programs, influence policies in government, laws and regulations, and in terms of what that means for the real estate sector. And the representative today, there we go on your screen, is May Rodriguez. She's the national president of the group. May, take it away.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon to everyone. Executives and officers of Habitat for Humanity Philippines, distinguished representatives from the government, fellow stakeholders and participants of this housing forum. The Subdivision and Housing Developers Association, with its vision of articulating the advocacy of the housing industry, of providing homes for more Filipinos, supports Habitat for Humanity and commits to partner with the organization in providing housing and transforming lives. With SHEDA's mission of partnering with the government and other sectors of society, Habitat included, towards undertaking programs and policies that foster a sustained housing industry, SHEDA commits to promote the building of resilient homes, inclusive developments, and the use of efficient and sustainable housing solutions, which Habitat also espouses in this housing forum. Also, with Habitat being an active member of SHEDA, we can work hand in hand in promoting our common objectives, not only in providing homes, but in the end, lead to better living conditions, improved health, and dignity among Filipinos. So again, thank you to Habitat for Humanity for inviting us, and we do express our commitment to all your goals. Thank you and good afternoon.
May, thank you so much for that message, and certainly I am, for one, am certain, of course, that they will need your support as they pursue, of course, what we've laid out, fairly big gaps in the market. Now, the the youth are obviously a part and parcel really to the sector, and we essentially heard over the weekend, last Saturday in fact was the Congress of over 300 youth across the country participating, even giving their own commitments here. In fact, let me then bring in, as you can see now on your screens, Arissa D. She's the Youth Congress representative, obviously a major stakeholder. Arissa, please take us through, of course, what that commitment is from you guys.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for that introduction, David. Today, I'll be presenting an excerpt of a youth statement collectively written by representatives of Habitat for Humanity Philippines, youth organizations, and committees, as we commit to hold the national government accountable in serving its people. So 2 out of 3 Filipinos are suffering from the housing crisis and are at high risk of losing their lives each day. Now more than ever, we are calling on our national government to rapidly work towards building sustainable communities and breaking down the barriers in accessing decent and affordable housing to ensure protection against diseases, casualties, and other detrimental impacts. We are in a housing crisis because of the following reasons, among others: the housing affordability gap, an unintended consequence of economic growth and land development that challenges those trying to find quality homes within their purchasing powers, the lack of proper urban planning and management of our limited land amidst our growing population, urban migration, and cyclical natural disasters. And lastly, the tedious housing project registration and accreditation process that requires 148 signatories, 28 permits, and 373 documents to be submitted, prolonging efforts geared towards ensuring the wide-scale accessibility of housing. Filipinos are consequently troubled in ways beyond the lack of 4 surrounding walls and a roof over their heads. Those heavily affected by the housing crisis live in an environment wherein their physical and mental health is constantly compromised. For the dreams and aspirations they have, their hope diminishes as their voices remain limited and unheard. They remain victims of violence, crimes, community fires, and stampedes. They continue to be neglected in important decision-making processes on matters like lockdown restrictions that don't consider its infeasibility due to the lack of shelter, the need to generate income for survival, and greater health risks from unsanitary conditions. The simple truth is that millions of Filipinos are suffering every day, and they face multiple barriers in uplifting themselves from their current situations due to the lack of decent housing. These issues have gone on for decades, and the time to solve them is now. We cannot afford to delay the process of closing the housing gap, nor continue wasting limited resources. The Senate Committee on Urban Planning estimates that over 30 billion pesos have gone to waste due to the over-reliance on subcontracting, improper location strategies along danger zones, and the failure to meet the requirements of a decent home based on the community's context. We know that it entails the involvement of community members in its planning and execution, proper design that ensures durability against any possible casualties, and accessibility to basic needs and services, among others. Why is it that the same mistakes are repeated? The House of Representatives adopted a resolution declaring a housing crisis in the country to increase the annual allocation for housing. For 2022, the DBM suggested an allotment of 6.39 billion pesos, or less than 1% of the DHSUD's proposed budget. This is simply insufficient and inappropriate given the extent of the housing crisis. The DHSUD needs more support and assistance from the national government, its various departments, and local government units in recognizing the significance of housing as a human right and an avenue for both social and economic development. We want to show you why the investment in housing is worth it. Importante ang bahay para maging safe. Nang alam mo, hindi ka masisilipan, hindi ka masasaksak, nang pwede kang gumising na nakangiti. The fulfillment of a basic need and human right pushes for human dignity and human development. Through decent and affordable shelter, we promote food security, access to clean water and electricity, from the reallocation of disposable income that enables individuals to focus on other livelihood opportunities. Through well-constructed shelter within holistically developed communities, we promote quality education, improved physical and mental health, and psychosocial development in a clean and safe environment with minimal disruptions and where norms and values are built for the common good. The increased accessibility to basic needs and services puts more individuals at capacity to actively participate in efforts that can drive their contribution to society and the economy to ultimately attain their self-sufficiency. So housing is not an expense, but an investment that enables every Filipino to create a life of living rather than of day-to-day survival. It is an investment towards nationwide development and in fulfillment of the SDGs. The housing crisis, together with the ongoing health crisis and economic recession, further reveal the need for systematic changes that target the heart of these issues. We need to work towards the long-term prosperity of the Philippines and all of its people. Our suggested approaches for the national government are as follows. Firstly, illustrate that housing is prioritized and given due allotment in the 2022 national budget. To fund better approaches of the DHSUD and its agencies to solve the housing crisis, and to incentivize civil society organizations and the private sector to do the same. Second, strengthen and streamline public policies and services to promote the feasibility and efficiency of building sustainable communities and executing non-discriminatory public housing programs that provide quality homes to all Filipinos that do not have one. Third, engage in participatory discourse for housing efforts, such as in the People's Plan approach, where the expertise and context of community members are recognized alongside the government, CSOs, and the private sector. And lastly, address the housing crisis from all fronts to mitigate all of the root causes and their impacts. Use what is already known and disseminate all relevant information on building decent housing across all concerned entities for solutions to be executed effectively and continuously. Kung talagang prioridad ng gobyerno ang taong bayan, sana maging prioridad ang pagbigay ng tahanan sa bawat pamilya kasi ito ay isa sa essential para sa kanila ngayon at para sa kanilang kinabukasan. We invite you to recognize the benefits of housing, to promote economic development, reduce inequality, and meet the SDGs. Not only that, but also as an avenue to shape active citizens that can actualize their potential and opportunity for national development. As our country's leaders, we ask that you use your capabilities, power, and influence to create and strengthen the foundations needed to unlock this. Because through shelter, we can empower. Thank you.
Arissa, thank you so much. In fact, I'm glad that Arissa brought up the sort of economic angle there. Before I introduce, I guess, the next speaker, just a little nugget too. So, we spend a lot of time here at Bloomberg TV talking to many economists. In fact, I was just speaking with one yesterday because the Philippines just released, I think, the GDP numbers for the third quarter. And the reality is that consumption within the country is still lagging. And a big part of consumption and how you unlock that really is housing. If people spend too much time worrying and spending on housing, they don't have any time to spend on other things. And certainly what the pandemic has done, it's exacerbated the unemployment problem in the country, which is why, based at least on one of the economists, I'm not going to name him anyway, that the Philippines and Thailand will be the laggards next year, and hopefully, of course, he's wrong as far as that is concerned. Which really goes into really what the issue that we're talking about today is really just giving people just a base to start and better their lives, if you will, and everything else will follow based on that. Now, at this point, I want to bring in, of course, our next speaker in terms of their commitments, and we're now looking at the construction industry, a fairly important segment. We're talking about the NUBWC, that's National Union of Building and Construction Workers. It's an association of the industry that promotes and defends the rights and interests of construction workers, and represented by the Secretary General. There we go on your screens, Mr. Santiago Nola. Santiago, sir, go ahead.
Thank you so much, David. To all the guests, stakeholders, partners, and government agencies, especially to Habitat Humanity Philippines, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity that you have been given to us to air our side and point of view in different matters involving construction workers. Our commitment message is to always participate in and contribute whatever we have and whatever we can, anytime, anywhere. We will continue to unite and work with all social partners and their noble goals that will promote and uphold the dignity of Filipino construction workers, believing that world of works that is humane and egalitarian for Filipino construction workers is still possible. We will work hard to uplift the lives of every Filipino construction workers through cooperation, legislation, negotiation, and legal partnerships. And from this day forward, invest with us, work with us. Do not treat us as your enemies and rivals. Treat us as a partner and friend in building the nation towards a better future for all of us. In the end, we are all humans living in a very small and complicated world. Walang ibang magtutulungan kundi tayo ring mga magkakababayan. Maraming salamat po at magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.
Thank you so much, Santiago. And I guess it just came to mind really when Santiago was just finishing up there. Let's keep in mind, of course, that part of the gap and the people also who lack housing are the construction workers themselves, right? So we are really in this together in a lot of ways. Now, NGOs, let me just pivot to that sort of perspective here. Certainly play a very big role in all of this, and there are many out there, of course, that have done their part and done their due as far as what the government is lacking as far as the gap is concerned. Now, let's bring in at this point in time the president of the Association of Foundations. It's a network of NGOs that essentially help in developing sustainable programs that serve communities, and an advocate here of key issues in society. The president of the Association of Foundations, Cecile Victoria Dominguez Yuhico. Let's have a listen.
On behalf of the Association of Foundations, I wish to congratulate Habitat for Humanity Philippines and its partners for this year's successful Philippines Housing Forum. The pandemic has exacerbated many of our country's pressing issues and deepened economic inequality. It has also forced us to rethink how we live, including how we design and build our homes, our workplaces, and our communities. We congratulate Habitat for Humanity Philippines for its collaborative leadership in bringing together diverse perspectives and facilitating dialogue to constantly improve and innovate on housing solutions that are more resilient, inclusive, sustainable, and accessible. At AF, our work is centered on supporting our member organizations through capacity building for good governance and program effectiveness, thereby enabling our member NGOs to become more effective partners as they support their communities. As a national network of foundations and NGOs, AF looks forward to supporting its member Habitat Philippines and collaborating on learning opportunities with you as you continue to help Filipinos build strength, stability, and self-reliance through shelter. Congratulations again to Habitat and its partners on an important and very successful Philippine Housing Forum. Thank you.
Yep, there we go. And we are just almost done. And let me just bring in, of course, in terms of the finality here of commitments, it's the government itself. And as you can see on your screens, Mr. Eduardo Del Rosario is coming up next. He's the Secretary of the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. It's actually a newly created unit. It's part of the Central Government Authority, and its purview is on the management of housing and human settlements. So let's have a listen, of course, to what the government's commitment is.
Good day, everyone. The Philippines is highly urbanizing at the rate of 47.41% for 2020. It means almost half of the country's over 100 million population reside in urban areas. We are also consistently ranked among the top 10 countries with high climate risk index and ranked fourth in the long-term climate risk index of most affected countries from 2000 to 2019. Due to our country's geographical location, we are regularly exposed to tropical storms, thus contributing to the challenges we face in the housing sector that was compounded by the global COVID-19 pandemic from 2020 to date. Against this backdrop, we, the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, is thankful to take up with local government units, shelter agencies, and other stakeholders who are determined to address the increasing housing needs. One teammate is, of course, the Habitat for Humanity Philippines, who invited me to this esteemed and highly anticipated virtual forum. As a prominent partner of the department, not only for this event, but more importantly, in the drive to realize the dream of every Filipino family to have decent homes to call their own, Habitat for Humanity has been coordinating with us in building strength, stability, and self-reliance among Filipino families by providing them with shelter. And now, we have partnered to bring you this year's virtual Philippine Housing Forum. With its theme, Building Forward Better for an Inclusive Housing, I am optimistic this forum will highlight the immediate need to build affordable and resilient homes through an inclusive approach while considering the natural and man-made challenges the Philippines is exposed to. I am also confident that through the various sessions featured in the forum, all participants will renew their determination in developing innovative and sustainable housing solutions. May this event reawaken everyone's drive to build environmentally equitable cities and communities that have full capacity to survive, adapt, and grow. I also expect all participants to obtain in-depth ideas and strategies for innovative, sustainable, and climate-resilient housing solutions after your engagement with key stakeholders, subject matter experts, industry professionals, and thought leaders. So on behalf of Team Vision, let me assure you that we are one with Habitat for Humanity Philippines in taking proactive measures to build resilient and sustainable human settlements. Rest assured that we will be together in transforming the lives of Filipino families and communities by building decent homes to restore hope and empower the nation while seeking to eliminate poverty and homelessness. Together, let us foster an economically vibrant housing and sustainable urban development in the Philippines that facilitates equitability and inclusiveness. Maraming salamat at mabuhay tayo lahat.
There you go. Message from the government. So I was just running, while you were listening to that, I was just running sort of the back of an envelope sort of calculation based on what Arissa was mentioning earlier. So the budget was 6 billion pesos, right? And just running the numbers, I think it's 4 million, roughly speaking, is the housing gap. Not that the government should spend everything, of course, on housing, and not that it is their sole role, because there are many facets through which you can actually solve the problem, not direct spending, obviously employment and engendering an economy. But the numbers essentially work out to about, if I'm doing my math correctly here, about 150 pesos per house based on a budget of 6 billion and a gap of 4 billion. So certainly it just puts into context that we need to do everything, and it's not just the government that should play a role in all of this. Now, let's take it back to government now, because we are coming up against the elections, and we were talking about how this isn't a simple problem. This will need to go through several administrations just by the sheer magnitude of the housing gap. And with a fresh administration coming in next year, that's perhaps an opportunity to really recast, if you will, the government housing programs, including perhaps budgets, if we need to talk about that. Now, what we've done is we've reached out to several of the contenders who've actually thrown their hats in the ring for next year's elections, and some of them have actually come out and came back to us with their own statements. Let me start off with, I'm sure everyone knows him, Isko Moreno, of course, the current mayor of Manila, Francisco Isko Moreno Dumagoso, and here is his message and his commitment.
Hi, sa ating mga opisyales at miyembro ng Habitat, maraming salamat sa tulong ninyo sa ating mga kababayan sa lungsod ng Maynila. Umasa kayo na ang inyong lingkod ay magiging kaisa ninyo sa pagtataguyod ng isang disente at malinis at sapat na pabahay, at ang maibalik natin ang dignidad sa pamumuhay ng mga mahihirap nating kababayan. Muli, ako, kung sakasakali, ay papalarin, ipagpapatuloy ko yung mga nasimulan natin sa Maynila, katulad ng Base Community, Condominium 1, Condominium 2, Binondominium 1, San Lazaro, Pedro Hill, at San Sebastian Residence, all in City Vertical Housing Program. Kokopyahin natin si Lee Kuan Yew. Huwag kayong mag-alala. Idol ko yon. Again, thank you. At may awa ang Diyos. With your help, magtatagumpay tayo. Mag-iingat po kayong lahat. Maraming salamat po.
Of course, I'm sure you all are fairly familiar with the story of Yorme and the hardships he's gone through, of course. And this is obviously an issue that he knows well about firsthand. And that's not making light, of course, of that situation. Which takes us also into the next presidential candidate who's also gone through his hardships. And I'm sure you all know, of course, ang ating pambansang kamao, the Senator Emmanuel Manny Pacquiao. Here's the message.
Binabati ko po ang lahat ng isang mapagpalang araw sa inyong lahat. First and foremost, thank you Habitat for Humanity for giving me the chance to be part of this monumental occasion. Alam naman po natin na lahat ay kaisa po ako sa isang organisasyon na may advokasya ng pamimigay ng pabahay. Since 2005, wala pa po ako sa politika. Gamit ang aking sariling pera, nagpatayo po tayo ng libreng pabahay sa Jinsan at Sarangani. Sa ngayon po ay halos 2,000 family na po ang nabigyan ng libreng pabahay. Ang pangarap ko po ay titiyakin ko na mas marami pang libreng pabahay ang maibigay natin sa mga mahihirap sa buong bansa. Para naman po sa mga may trabaho pero kapos sa budget, mababang upa at mababang presyo ng pabahay ang ating ibibigay sa kanila. Naniniwala po ako na ang pangarap ay mabubuo sa loob ng magandang bahay. Kaya ito ang pinakamahalaga sa bawat pamilyang Pilipino ang magkaroon ng sariling tahanan. Kalidad at murang pabahay, yan ang isa sa aking prioridad. Kung nagagawa ko po ito habang ako ay nagbubuksing pa lamang, hindi po malabo na mas magawa ko ito kung tayo ay papalarin. Malapit sa aking puso ang Habitat for Humanity. 2011 ay naging Habitat Hero Ambassador nila ako at dahil sa pagtutulungan ay nakapagpatayo po tayo ng 100 pabahay sa Sarangani. Hanggang ngayon po, ay kaisa ako ng Habitat for Humanity sa paglaban sa kahirapan at pagbibigay ng pabahay sa mga mahihirap. Kung pagtutuunan ng pansin, ang 1.9 million informal settlers ay kaya nating solusyonan ang problema sa pabahay in 4 to 5 years. Magkakaroon po ng pabahay ang lahat ng pamilya na walang bahay. Lahat ng ito ay posible. Naniniwala po ako na nagsisimula ang maayos na lipunan mula sa maayos na tahanan. Muli, magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Ako po si Senator Manny Pacquiao, ang anak ng mahirap. Panalo ang mahirap. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Okay. I actually didn't know that, going all the way back to 2005. But we all know, of course, of his efforts to use his own money really for social causes, particularly, of course, in Mindanao. Now, let's try and get a sense of the commitment from the current Vice President and also presidential aspirant, Leni Robredo. Let's have a look.
My warmest greetings to Habitat for Humanity Philippines and to all the participants of the Philippine Housing Forum. Hello to everyone joining today's discussion, and thank you to our organizers for opening this space to shed light on our challenges in housing. These challenges have only intensified because of COVID-19's impact. Before the pandemic, our housing backlog was already at 6.7 million. By 2040, our housing needs could reach over 22 million. Our administration will be committed to closing the gaps in safe and inclusive housing for Filipinos. First, in order to facilitate housing production through policies and partnerships, we'll fully implement the People's Plan approach, anchored on consultative and participatory development planning. Aside from providing incentives for the private sector, we will address problems with existing construction codes and subdivision restrictions. which have been cited as constraints in improving our housing supply. Alongside this, we will shorten the process of securing requirements for new developments. Second, in order to build resilient cities and communities, we will provide safer, affordable, and decent homes to informal settler families and those living in danger zones, using the People's Plan approach. We will prioritize types of relocation, using off-city relocation only as a last resort. It is also time for the housing sector to provide non-mortgage-based models like public rental housing. With limited supply of land for socialized housing, we need to reassess the use and location of government offices and properties. Our goal: unlock the potential of government lands in pursuing urban renewal and rural development. Third, in order to advance innovative and sustainable housing solutions, we need significant changes in terms of resources and strategies. We will pursue effective urban planning with strong coordination among concerned agencies in a government-to-government process, and with focus on building platforms for participatory planning for urban renewal. We will create financing literacy campaigns targeting the underserved. Finally, we need to improve housing data. In particular, we need a better database of informal settler families and an information sharing mechanism among land-related agencies. Fourth, to open up financing and investments in affordable housing. We will increase budgetary support for housing for the underprivileged, ensuring full functioning communities with mandatory provision for basic needs, facilities, and livelihood. We will establish appropriate financing principles for the underprivileged and homeless. We will facilitate access to information on various housing technology options that will lower costs. These are just some of the steps we will take to build forward better for inclusive housing. We continue to engage with sectors, experts, and communities to come up with an inclusive policy platform that is substantial, that is doable, and that takes everyone's concerns and inputs into account. Every step and plan in the housing sector and beyond will be informed by the values and aspirations we share. All of them will be underpinned by good governance, by leadership that is competent and compassionate, that comes from a place of deep love. The road ahead of us will not be easy, but as long as we help each other and roll up our sleeves to do the work that matters, I have no doubt that we can achieve the future of our hopes. One that is safer, more sustainable, more inclusive. Thank you very much.
And there we go. We just heard from the current Vice President. And just in case you're wondering, and you joined us in the last, 5 minutes, just 5 minutes or so, we did hear, of course, from Mayor Isko, from Senator Pacquiao, and our current Vice President. Now, just to reiterate and just to emphasize that we have reached out, of course, to all the prominent and major contenders, the three of which, of course, that you just watched did come back with their own messages, and that we will, of course, Habitat Philippines will endeavor to continue reaching out to all major contenders for next year's presidency to really get a sense of what they plan in the event that they do win next year's elections. Now, we're moving into the closing part, and obviously we need to hear from Habitat itself and what these 2 days have meant. We've had a lot of information. Let's try and put everything together and really find solutions to what really is an urgent and concrete and fairly tangible problem right now. At this point in time, I want to bring in the Vice President of Habitat for Humanity International, Luis Noda. Mr. Noda, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really a pleasure to me to be here with you. And good afternoon to the authorities that are with us in this conference, either national government or local government, representatives of the private sector, academia as well, the media, and of course, our vibrant representatives of the youth. You are not the future of this country, you're the present. So it's great to have you here. And it was fantastic to hear the declaration that you put together around this event. So we're coming to the end of this Building Forward Better for Inclusive Housing as an event for the Philippines. What a fantastic 2 days we have had. We had so many presentations, insightful participations, and then mind-triggering, presentations and discussions that hopefully are inspiring us. First of all, to take seriously the challenge of addressing the housing gap in the Philippines. And the second part, which is acting together, working together. If there's something that we have got from these sessions today and yesterday, is that the challenge is monumental. The challenge is big. And after COVID-19, the challenge is bigger. Therefore, we all have the responsibility to stand up for this challenge. And this will require everybody's participation. Everybody's participation. We are looking for an ecosystem type of response to the challenge that we are facing. So my hope is that through the 4 trucks that we have had since yesterday and today, you have been inspired, you have been acquiring knowledge, and you have been as well mobilized in the cause of addressing this housing gap. Let me also mention something that it's important for us. We as Habitat for Humanity International, we participate in the COP26 conference that is taking place in Glasgow for the climate change issue. And one thing that we are calling is on stakeholders to incorporate adequate and affordable housing into future responses to climate change in 2 ways. First, to ensure that the people most impacted by the climate change are put at the center of what we do. The 2 ways are to ensure efforts to reduce carbon emissions that do not rise the cost of housing, but are affordable in a way that a lot of people can access to housing. And the other thing is to ensure that the people most impacted, as I said, by climate change are put at the center of the solutions that we create. We definitely look forward to furthering these conversations at the Asia Pacific Housing Forum that will take place in the month of December from the 7th to the 9th. It's going to be a virtual call as well, a virtual conference, and we have thousands and thousands of people that sign in for this. So let me invite you to participate from this culminating event of all these housing events, housing forum events that have been taking place. And we will have 4 tracks over there that we will address. First, build resilient cities and communities. Second, innovative housing solutions and technologies. Third, advance sustainability in the housing sector. And fourth, finance affordable housing. I just want to also mention to all of you that as Habitat for Humanity, we believe that everybody has to contribute to this solution. We believe that governments, civil society, academia, corporations, individuals, youth, everybody has a role to play for a humanity to build a better future. So I want to thank you all deeply for engaging with this issue of decent, affordable housing. We invite partnerships with you to create innovative and effective solutions to solve the housing deficit in the Philippines and in Asia Pacific as a region. So this is how we can work to truly build greener, safer, and more resilient solutions from now on. Thank you very much to all my colleagues here in Habitat Philippines, and thank you for everybody, all of you that participated. So back to you now. Thank you.
Luis, thank you so much for that. And that's a very good reminder also, just framing this against the backdrop of COP26, like here, just to share just very quickly here on our shows, we've had a lot of people come through the last, I would say, week and a half or so. And one of the things that stood out is, yes, you can talk about money, you can talk about financing, but you also have to be smart where you put these investments, right? So in the case of Metro Manila, I grew up there and I'm fairly familiar with the floods, and this is where really the problem comes together. If you build in places really where that might be at risk because of climate change and rising sea levels, then we might find ourselves back to square one. Just a little bit of a nugget. And it's really part of a conversation, I think, that's really taking place at COP26. In fact, there were a couple of panels specifically on that issue. Now, just to cap 2 days of insightful, hopefully, and informative, and I'm sure all of you have come out of, hopefully, these last 2 days with something useful. Let me just call in the president of Habitat of Humanity for Humanity Philippines Homeowner Association in Pinagbuhatan, Pasig City, to close the event in gratitude and in prayer.
David, can I jump in and mention one thing before we do that?
Go ahead.
I would like to present the plaques and recognition for the different contributors of today, and as well as for the event. So before we hear the closing prayer, I just want to present some awards and plaques to the people that have contributed today. So I just want to name, if we can go to the slides, to the different slides that we have. Thank you very much. So Mr. Ahmed Rizaldi Moti, Chief Executive of Home Development Mutual Fund, Pag-IBIG. So thank you very much for your participation. The plaque says, instrumental in elevating housing at the center of national agenda and seeking innovative, sustainable, affordable, and climate resilient solutions to the country's housing issues. And this is signed by Mrs. Lourdes Gutierrez Alfonso, the Chair and President of the National Board of Trustees of Habitat Philippines, and your faithful servant here. So thank you very much. The same for Mr. Santiago Nola, Secretary General, National Union of Builders and Construction Workers. To Ms. May Rodriguez, National President, Subdivision and Housing Developers Association.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to you. To Cecile Victoria Dominguez Huico, President of Association of Foundations. To Arisa D, Youth Congress Representative. Thank you very much. To Secretary Eduardo del Rosario, Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. And to you, David Ingles. Thank you very much for helping us and moderating this session. And I just want to continue and mention that all of this wouldn't be possible with the support of the partners that we have. Your contributions have been significant for this to become a reality as a housing forum for the Philippines. So I just want to mention Base Baha'i Foundation for sponsoring Track 1, to Closing Plenary for Track 2 sponsor, Pag-IBIG Fund as a bronze sponsor as well, to Jardín Brem Wong as well, I think, Youth Congress sponsor, and Davis Paintis, Youth Congress sponsor. So these are the supporting organizations that have been part of this event, and we are very, very honored to have you supporting us. The Department of Human Settlement and Urban Development, the Organization of Socialized and Economic Housing Developers of the Philippines, the Subdivision and Housing Developers Association, my colleagues at Habitat for Humanity International's Terwilliger Center for Innovation and Shelter, the German-Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and IBC Asia and Fair Building Network. So I think I'm not forgetting anyone. So thank you very much for your support and participation. Without your support, this wouldn't be possible. With that being said, then let me go back to you, David, and for the final part of the closing ceremony. Thank you.
And Luis, thank you so much, of course, for extending, of course, that gratitude to everyone who has contributed these last 2 days or so, particularly if you've been listening the last 60 minutes or so. Now, as we were pointing out, of course, and just to really cap 2 days of hopefully helpful sessions. I want to bring in, of course, Mr. Bonifacio Florese to help us end these 2 days in gratitude and prayer. Prayer,
Okay. Sige po. So let us pray. Magandang hapon po sa lahat. Tayo po ay manalangin. Panginoong Diyos, Ikaw po ang gumawa ng langit at lupa. Sa pamamagitan ng iyong salita ay nagkaroon ng anyo ang lahat mula sa kawalan. Nilalang ninyo ang lahat sa mundo upang aming alagaan, pakinabangan at panagutan. Nilalang ninyo kami at binigyan ng kakayanan upang ipagpatuloy ang inyong mabubuting hangarin at gawain sa sanglibutan. Makapangyarihan ka, Panginoon, at dakila sa lahat. Ibinabahagi ninyo sa amin ang inyong kakayanang lumikha. Nasa amin ang inyong pagpapala na gawin ang tama para sa kapakanan ng lahat na ikaluluwalhati ng iyong pangalan. Kinikilala namin na kayo, Panginoon, ang nanguna sa paghahanda at kaganapang ito. Pinasasalamatan namin ang pagkakataong ito na makapagsama-sama sa ganitong talakayan. Salamat po sa kaparaanan upang mapag-usapan ang mahalagang katotohanan. Suliranin man o solusyon tungkol sa pabahay. Buksan po ninyo ang aming puso at kaisipan sa pagtangkilik sa mga bagong pamamaraan na magpapaunlad sa maraming aspeto ng pabahay. Bigyan mo po kami ng pangunawa sa mga tunay na kalagayan ng mga kapuspalad na wala pa ring marangal na tirahan. Ipaalala ninyo po sa amin ang mga responsibilidad sa kapaligiran habang sinusolusyonan ang pagpapaunlad sa abot kayang pabahay. Salamat po at pinagbuklod ninyo kaming lahat mula sa iba't ibang sektor ng lipunan. Salamat po sa mga nagbahagi ng kanilang karunungan at oras sa 2 araw at sa pag-organisa ng Philippines Housing Forum. Pagpalain ninyo po kaming lahat. Sumayin niyo po ang papuri sa pangalan ni Jesucristo. Amen.
Okay, salamat po. I was told about an hour back that I needed to give closing remarks. I hope all of you don't mind if I just go through randomly just some thoughts in my head, just listening to the last 60 minutes or so. And you know what? I want to just start off with Hong Kong, and it will make sense, I promise you, because what we're seeing here as far as the housing problem, and there is a massive one here, puts the issue of the Philippines both into context as far as the now and in the future. So I was just looking, and I'd invite everyone to look at, if you're on Instagram, SCMP News, that's a leading newspaper here. The latest post, I'll try and show it here. The average waiting times for public housing in Hong Kong is now at the longest in 22 years. So it's at 6 years. Why is that important? Hong Kong is the most expensive housing market in the world. That's one. A parking space anywhere here can go for as much as $500,000 US. Parking space. It's also the least affordable housing market in the world. One measure is monthly mortgage payments is the equivalent of about 70% of the average monthly income of households here. So a lot of money goes to housing in the private market. in the public market, then you have this other problem. So why is the Hong Kong example important? Why am I making that distinction between most expensive housing market and least affordable housing market? It's because it's a reminder that the issue of housing has both an urgent and also a longer term component to it. The fact that you have people here in a very affluent city like Hong Kong still having this problem underscores the longevity of the issue, and it speaks to a solution that needs a longer term component to it, which is why we looked at the messages from the candidates for next year's election, right? Now, a lot of these candidates, whether they say it directly or not, really, I hope that the agenda will really be economic development, because in a lot of ways, you have growth and many other things, problems go away, things like debt, for example. Now, progress is obviously good. It's a good blessing to have, but people get left behind, right? That's just the other side to economic progress. It's not always prosperity for all. And, in the case of the Philippines, my understanding is the housing gap is 4 million, 3 million of which, or is it 4 million families, 3 million of which are in Metro Manila, right? And the reason that's important indirectly is because the unevenness of prosperity across the country has indirectly resulted in that housing gap being so concentrated in one part of the country, right? China, and we covered China a lot here in the show, and the main priority of the government after 3 decades of super fast growth, you might have heard about this theme called common prosperity. The president, Xi Jinping, mentioned, can't remember exactly when, that housing is for living, it's not for speculation. So even in a country like China that's growing, it's also a problem. Now, the fact that we're talking about this in places like Hong Kong, New York, London, what have you, I can't even begin to imagine the magnitude and the gap, really, what we're seeing in the Philippines, if it is already a problem here. Now, the fact that, let me end on something fairly, hopefully optimistic. The fact that there are gaps and there are numbers that we attach to those gaps means that there are ways by which we can measure progress, right? Moving forward, and simply not to look at those gaps as a sign of discouragement, because those are milestones that hopefully we can hit moving forward. And let me just take this full circle again, after 2 days and a lot of information out there, that the housing problem is both a problem now and it's a problem in the future. How big it remains a problem in the future, like Hong Kong, which is a very wealthy city, but people still have to wait 6 years to get their own housing from a very wealthy government, speaks to the challenge right now for policymakers and all the NGOs and every one of you involved, of course, back home. What you need to do now to prevent the problem from getting bigger well into the future. And hopefully these last 2 days have provided a lot of information on that, and hopefully we can start to act tangibly on this fairly urgent and also future issue. So on that note, I'd like to thank everyone who joined us in the last 60 minutes and obviously the last 2 days or so. And hopefully this was helpful for all of you. And I'd also like to thank, of course, Habitat here for having me today and help moderate this session. Maraming salamat po. Have a great rest of your Thursday evenings ahead. Hope to see you all soon. Thank you.